And welcome to May's Tea Break, where we're talking about finding and shaping evidence, and evidence in answers in particular. I'll explain more about that in a sec. I'm Oliver Mantell. I'm the Director of Evidence at the Audience Agency, which some of you may have come across me before in these tea breaks or other events. Then I'll be doing sort of most of the presenting of the content in today's session. But I'm also joined by two colleagues, well, one colleague speaking and one colleague who's just, as ever, being enormously helpful. Isaac is also part of the evidence team who's there on the camera, but also Rachel Oxon King is coming in from our development team to say a little bit about this as well, because she's been working on this this project as well. So for the purposes of audio description, I'm a white male, blonde hair, blue eyes, in a very plain looking room, but a black t-shirt. I'll pass over to Rachel just to say a quick hello and do a little description, and then we'll dive in with the content. So Rachel, if you're there.
Hi everybody, yes, I'm Rachel. I'm a white female, sort of brownish hair, glasses, and yes, I've blurred my background because my room is messy.
Oh yeah, my room isn't even interesting enough to be messy, I'm afraid. Anyway, thanks Rachel. So yes, and also if you want live transcription or captions, they're available at the bottom. Any questions, dive in on the way through, but there's a chance for questions at the end. But without more ado, as they say, let's get on. So what we're talking about today is a bit different from the usual shapes that the tea break sessions take for those of you who've been to previous ones, because we're often talking about particular pieces of analysis we've done or particular things we found out. But in this session, we're kind of panning out a bit and trying to give a little bit of a sort of context for why are we even talking about this stuff, where do you find it, how can you affect it and influence it, and so forth. That's not because we particularly enjoy talking about ourselves. I'll let you draw your own conclusions about what we do. But it's because we don't want to assume that all the stuff that we know about what we're doing, without us having actually said it at any point. So hopefully this will make it a little bit easier and clearer to access the various stuff we do, and so it can be helpful. So, clicking on. So the purpose of the session, what we're going to do is essentially, if you'll forgive the clunky visual metaphor, is give you a peek behind the curtain. So kind of a bit of a sense of why we're doing what we're doing and what our evidence stuff is, but also then how you actually find it, particularly in relation to audience answers. There's a whole new development there which we'll talk through. And then finally, different points, different ways that you can shape and influence. Some of which are new. So a little bit about the evidence team in the background to this. So sort of officially, it's a relatively new team. So we've been sort of working as part of the agency for 18 months, but effectively we kind of started to exist through the COVID period. We've been doing various analysis, during all those kind of lockdown periods, etc. And so really the purpose of the team spun out of that, as well as kind of wider work we've done previously. But essentially what we do is we take a whole load of different information about audiences, which could come out of other stuff that people across the audience agency do, like in our research consultancy projects. It could come out of particular data sets that we gather, so things like audience answers, and it could be out of original research we do of some sort. So the cultural participation monitor is something that's come up regularly in terms of these tea breaks. So that's a sort of panel survey that we run, but also we do other bits of research and analysis, and also analyse various different data sets of our own or others. So essentially we're looking to reuse or create all these different data sets to do essentially one of three things. One is to create data assets, which sounds very grand, but basically means stuff that we and you can use. So things like all the descriptions for audience spectrum and various resources around that, or it could be particular dashboards that sort of summarise information, or it could be a particular piece of analysis or tools or ways of working. So we do all that kind of thing. We also try and find out particular things. So we produce insights of various sorts. So that could be shared in a variety of contexts, which I'll go on to. But essentially, it's creating new kind of knowledge about audiences and then disseminating it. And the understanding bit is really that dissemination part of the process. So we're helping other people understand what's coming out of these. So we're doing training, or we're doing presentations, or we're writing things that people can access. So we're a curious mixture, if you like, of analysts and storytellers. That's kind of how we see ourselves, and trying to do both of those types of things. And that then gets fed through into a variety of different places. So yes, events like this one and lots of others. We do sort of PR and support things which might end up on whatever, Radio 3 or the BBC or wherever. But also, publishing reports, producing blog posts, etc. We also work with colleagues who are working on particular projects with particular organisations or groups of organisations from time to time, whether that's support on tender type stuff, or it's support of actual projects and reporting. All of which stuff in terms of outputs has historically been collected through the Audience Agency website. Now, the Audience Agency website has quite a lot of stuff on it, not least because we're quite a big, quite a busy, quite a varied organisation. We have fingers in lots of different pies. We're sharing lots of things all the time. There's how-to guides, there's information about the organisation, there's things about the team, there's articles, blog posts, whatever. It gets quite busy. So part of what we've been trying to do, which we'll be sharing with you today, is to try and make some of the stuff that we're producing to help you understand audiences a little bit easier to actually get to, and to know it's there and to be able to use. So part of that is we've got this new platform called Audience Answers, which is the kind of new iteration or metamorphosis of Audience Finder. And there's loads more to say about that, and I won't. But there is an event next Wednesday that will talk in much more detail about the whole of Audience Answers and how all that works. So if you like, this particular event is like the kind of the hipster before it was cool, kind of getting in on the ground floor type version of understanding some of this answer stuff. At least that's how I like to see myself. That platform has now been developed and launched, and we figured that if you wanted to know answers about audiences, and quite obviously we're going to Audience Answers as the place to do that, it seemed a bit strange to have other answers about audiences that live somewhere else. So what we tried to do is bring all of that stuff together so that you've got a clear place to go to find out about audiences. Now, all of our evidence stuff that's on Audience Answers is available before the login. So essentially you can go to the site, you can find it, you don't need to enter any details or anything. But nonetheless, it lives in the same place. So it's kind of, it's consistent. It's the style is recognizable from one to the other. You can find it in one place. You need a bookmark one site, etc. So hopefully that will make it all a little bit easier. It's also, the intention is essentially to make it a little bit clearer and easier to foreground. So speaking of the Audience Answers site, I should get onto this bit. This is just to say, I don't know about you, but I'm always a little bit skeptical when people offer to give me lots of stuff for free. I'm always thinking, okay, so what's the flip side? Where's this going exactly? So I thought it was worth saying really upfront. The Audience Agency is a charity. We exist to encourage audience engagement and putting audiences at the heart of arts and culture sector. So to that extent, anything that we produce and share through evidence that you use and find useful and apply, that is already a win for us. That's what we were trying to achieve. That's our charitable mission. So if you like, that is the payoff for us, is if you find it helpful. Hopefully also it helps support our organisation's reputation. People know us as people that know about audiences. And of course, it supports the development and maintaining and extension of our expertise. So when people want to look for people to work with, they'll know that we know what we're talking about, because we do. This evidence stuff also lets us maybe try some stuff out that we otherwise would be a bit more risky if it was on a client project with a very set deadline. So it's a bit of an R&D function in that respect as well. And from time to time, the evidence team deliver paid work, but that's, you know, separate, if you like, from the evidence we're delivering publicly. But maybe it'll draw on similar kind of tools, techniques, experience, whatever. So yeah, so that's just to be nice and clear and frank about what we're doing and why we're doing it. So hopefully you can then feel that if you see stuff that we produce that's useful, you can fill your boots with absolutely no concern that, you know, there's any other agenda apart from it being helpful to you. So there we are. That's what we're doing. So moving on then to the evidence bit and audience answers. Hopefully, I think, and I can say this because I didn't design it, but I think it's beautiful and, you know, a nice, really big step forward in terms of what it looks like and how it works. Essentially, if you come to audience answers, you'd arrive on the home page, but there's a series of tabs down the side. If you click on the sector data one, which is just that one there, without having to log in, you will appear on this section. And as it'll show here, you've then got hyperlinks, which will take you to particular headlines, events, topics, and other ways of carving up the data in terms of the location, art form, segment, etc. So what I'm now going to do is stop sharing this screen and pop onto the live version. I'm aware that doing stuff live is always super risky, but you know, that's fun, isn't it? So stating it. Yeah, you shouldn't work with children, animals, or live web demos, but we'll see. Is that, no, that's the wrong thing. Let's try again. Will be this one. Okay. Is that visible to people? Anyone could give me a nod to say that you can see. Well, yeah, wonderful. So you can see here, if you went straight to the home page, it would look like this, and you can sign in very easily. You just put in your email address and it'll send you a link. But if you don't even want to do that, you just come down here, extract the data, and boom, we're in. We're into this bit. So we've got that bit at the top, which is giving us our links to various different bits of the data. But what we've tried to do is foreground the key stories and headlines bit right at the top, in a way that, you know, previously there was a little bit, you know, buried depending on which story you were looking at. So here it's pulling out 3 particular findings. In this instance, they happen to be for the latest cultural participation monitor. But as we do other different things, there could be different bits that end up in there, or bits from particular tea breaks or whatever. And that will then carry you through to the relevant section. So at a really simple level, you can look at this and go, well, is there something new there that I haven't seen before? Okay, so if I keep an eye on that section, I can kind of know that I'm on top of whatever's new. So that's that little bit, and obviously you can then link through to a whole big pile of extra things. I should say that at this stage, this page, part of audience answers links back to the audience agency site for particular pieces of content, because that's where they currently live. But progressively we'll migrate things across, and everything new will come into here as well. So you can treat this as your kind of go-to place, but if you find yourself on the audience agency website having clicked something, that's why. But progressively it'll all just end up in here, if that makes sense. So we'll put the new wave of the cultural participation monitor will go on here. We'll bring the last one across as well. We'll bring all kind of new content through. We've also, because we've got our sales tracker dashboards that we had a tea break on a few months back, but the links to those are often a little bit buried, so maybe a little bit trickier to get to. So now they're nice and sort of clear out at the top, so you can click through to a list of dashboards and dashboard related resources. So hopefully that makes those a little easier to lay your hands on. And also the cultural participation monitor, because that's a really big piece of work that we're doing these. Multiple waves. We've been, we've done 8, we're about to do 9, and we're keeping going with those sort of 3 times a year. So that has quite big chunks of new findings about the population. So again, it's nice and foregrounded, so you can get to that bit. So if that's our little intro bit, we can access all sorts of things. We're also aware, because we record all these events, as you saw, the little red button going on. So we then will host those here, so you can see whatever the last event was. So if you particularly missed something, you can kind of catch up with it. And there's links to previous ones, but also a link through to our YouTube channel, which will have all of the videos grouped by type. So, tea breaks or place events or cultural participation monitor or whatever. Also links to upcoming events. So for example, that event next Wednesday I mentioned, the Insights into Action from Audience Answers. So that's Wednesday afternoon. You can see that there and go to it if you want. Yeah, so that's our events bit. The other thing which I think we've maybe not been as explicit about in the past as might be useful is that we have some particular topics we're particularly interested in looking at, and that we use to prioritize what particular analysis we do or research we do, and therefore we'll use as a way of grouping content. That doesn't mean it's everything we do, but it does mean it's sort of some particular key stuff that we do. So as you can see here, the stuff around cultural participation in the broadest sense, who does what, whether that's in person, online, or participatory work. It's about people doing culture and how that's going. We know the hot topic at the moment is the cost of living and the impacts of that. So we've got that nice and sort of prominently highlighted. As time goes by, it could be that then switches out into different topics. We will see. But as an agency, we do lots of work around place as well. And indeed, we've got a new place consultant that started, I think, as recently as yesterday. So we'll be gathering together all our place content there, which will be about essentially how various different things differ by place, but also things that are place specific, like the role of working from home or that kind of localness and stuff that we've seen are really big drivers of engagement. So we can gather together a whole load of stuff there. And then finally, trying to push a little bit more to the future and future trends and anticipating where things are going, looking at where kind of engagement may be different in as we move forward. Some of that around digital, some of it around sort of social trends and behaviours and interests and so forth. But there's a whole gathering together of stuff around the future audiences. In time, we'll also have a series of other little sort of hot links, which will go to sort of thematically grouped topics. So there might be one, for example, on disability or digital or whatever, which will just appear there as well. So you can find things by theme. But each of these these kind of main four, will have their own sort of summary homepage or sort of landing page, which will then collate all the resources for each of those and have a bit of explanation of how they all work. So if those are topics that particularly interest you, rest assured they're topics that interest us. If you think there's other topics we should be looking at, again, let us know. So yes, there we are. And another chance of getting in touch. We're also really conscious that when people access or come and try and engage with evidence data, they're often coming at it with one of several very particular lenses. So what we're trying to do in the rest of this page is to reflect those lenses. So people will often say to us, well, I don't know, let's say I'm a dance organisation in the West Midlands. I'm trying to do lots of work with lower engaged family audiences. Or, I don't know, I'm an opera organisation that works in the North East, and I'm trying to engage with like sort of, my core audience or whatever. So the rest of the summary of information is kind of arranged in such a way that you can select which of those things are most relevant to you and pull the relevant content that's grouped that way, if that makes sense. So there's a bit about audience spectrum. So this is our segmentation tool. So you can find out about each of the segments. So this is sort of bringing through information that you may have seen on elsewhere. But also, links to how to engage with audience spectrum more. And here at the top, there's a new audience spectrum map, which we will take a quick peek at just very quickly. There's lots in here, but we don't have time to dwell on it too much. But what this map is essentially doing is it's taking information about who lives where in terms of audience spectrum segments that you might have seen in previous versions of the audience finder dashboards. But it's doing two things rather than just the one thing of saying who's where. So it includes that, but it also includes which group is dominant in any given location. So which group are there more of than any other group? And it's doing it based on postcode geography. So area, district, and sector. So we can start at the top level and we can look at postal areas across the UK. We can see that different particular segments are dominant in different areas. We've got a little pocket of commuter land culture buffs, so sort of highly engaged old audiences around pockets of the southeast, perhaps not a great surprise. Some different groups, home and heritage, some of the older mid-engaged groups around lots of the coastline. We've got pockets of our streets across large chunks of the north, for example, particularly the northeast and northern half of Cumbria, and so on. So we can see at the broad level what's going on. And then if we zoom in a bit, let's find somewhere that something interesting is happening. Let's click on Leeds. Always nice to go to Leeds. So we can see that Leeds is dominant for experience seekers, but actually there's lots of other groups there's quite high proportions of as well. So we can kind of see that at a summary level for the overall area, or we can zoom in and say, okay, let's look at Leeds broken down at the postal district level. This is the equivalent of kind of Leeds 2, Leeds 3, Leeds 30, etc. And here, for those who know Leeds, you'll probably recognise a pattern where we've got a whole load of frontline families, so kind of lower engaged family audiences across South Leeds. We've got some of the more rural bits heading up towards Harrogate, who, surprise, surprise, is lots of commuter land culture buffs, really high engaged groups. And we've got a spike here up where the universities are, loads of experience seekers, so relatively higher engaged, but younger and more varied art forms. And then more of a mixed picture as you get out into more rural areas. So that feels like Leeds, but it gives you a nice little overview. And you can then click on each one of these and say, okay, so in fact, let's pick, this is quite a nice example, if I can get them in the right place. No, that's Leeds 4, no, I'm not doing very well here. Leeds 6 is somewhere in there. Anyway, this will do, Leeds 5. So you can see there's loads of experience seekers in this area. It's kind of bordering lots of student bits of Leeds, but you can see who else is there as broad overview. So essentially makes a lot of this summary information about segments sort of like really easy to access directly. What you also might want to do though, rather than just looking at who's dominant in the area, is to click on the particular segment, and you can see it gives you mapping of that particular segment. And at any point we can reset the map and jump back to the top level. Again, the same thing will work here. If we want to say, okay, where are the trips and treats, for example, we can see, this was quite distinctive kind of, and a little bit further out down the southeast. And I believe if I go down here, we can also then select the particular subtypes, so the more precise subgroups, and see that kind of picture. So, the T1 group, the more young families are skewed a little bit more out that way. And then if we come down to the T2 group, we can, they're not in Angola, that's a bit of a slip, sorry. They are, you can see where we had lots of the T2, so up in this sort of that band there, we've got sort of lots more of the T2 group in Wales and further out in terms of, and Dumfries and Galloway, Cornwall, etc. So that lets you again get more of a sense of the subsegments in a kind of easy access view. So I have already been talking for too long, so I will very quickly show you the other bits and then hand over to Rachel.
Ollie, just very briefly, just while we're on it for the recording, someone just asked in the chat, what is it based on? So they said, is it based on the census? If you just want to very briefly say what the
lovely, yes. So the segments are based on cultural engagement data that is then modelled out using census and other data. Essentially, we've got a household directory which allocates each household to a particular type, so we can then use that to map what proportion of each type there are in different areas. So, if that's an okay, very quick summary. Okay, so we've then got summary information by nation. So we've got, for example, a specific Scotland dashboard, so you can access that through clicking on the Scotland bit. And indeed, if you click through on the England bit, you've then got English areas, so North, South, Midlands, and London, with more things grouped under those. And then finally, at the bottom, we've got these summary pages, which are based on types of activity. And as we have more content, we may disaggregate some of these and split them out But for the moment, we've got libraries and literature, museums, galleries and heritage, outdoor arts and festivals, and then performing arts as a group. So again, if you're a performing arts organisation that's in West Midlands, you can look at performing arts and you can look at the West Midlands. So I will hand over to Rachel just for a couple of observations, because I know there's lots of skill and background in terms of how we've gone about doing various bits of this, which might be nice to say a bit about. So yeah, over to you, Rachel. Just direct me and I'll click through to where you want to go.
Thank you, Oliver. Hi again, everybody. As Oliver said, I'm the senior product designer here at the Audience Agency. I've been designing websites and digital products of various kinds for, goodness, over 13 years now, with a focus on really trying to make them accessible and usable for everyone throughout that. I was really excited to be able to work with the evidence team on designing a new home for all their excellent content. Our primary aim was really to make all of this research much more findable in an accessible and a user-friendly way. And yeah, it's a work in progress, but we've started to do this in several ways, with answers in general, and also this area of the site. We try to make accessible design choices by default, rather than kind of having a switch that says enter accessible mode. We work them into the designs themselves rather than doing that. So as one example, we're really careful with like the color contrast for those who have differences in color vision. And we don't use color as the only indicator of difference. So for example, in the map that you just saw, shades of color are easier to distinguish, and two different colors that might look kind of similar if you have differences in how you see color. And we also use patterns to differentiate things. We haven't seen any charts yet. Oh. But in the chart templates that we currently use on the actual Audience Agency website, we do use patterns as well to distinguish between different bars, so that you don't just have colour as a differentiator there. And we have exciting plans for the future to actually build more kind of interactive charts into this site, so that you can sort of download the data table behind it. You can download the charts in various formats, and also so that we are definitely consistent with how we're using charts, so that they're always as accessible as they can be. So if we go back to the homepage, you'll notice we've tried to keep the kind of long text blocks. We've tried to steer away from that as much as possible. This is partly to say that it's scannable by everyone. You know, we highlight important bits in bold, so that it's really digestible at a glance. But this also helps with people with dyslexia and other conditions like that, so that it's much more readable that way. And yes, as you saw, we have the video and event section, which is again just providing different formats of engaging with the research that we do, so that, you know, if reading articles is not the thing for you, then you can watch the videos, or indeed come to an event like this one. And yeah, we've just tried to make it look friendly, make it look clean, introduce some sort of visual differentiation between the different ways of slicing and dicing the data, the research, so that it just looks a bit more user-friendly and exciting, hopefully, like the little map that you can click on and things like that. But the most important thing about designing is that we try to do it in collaboration with the people who are actually going to be using it. So if you have any feedback or comments, we would be very happy to hear them. And I think Oliver's going to talk now about ways you can get involved.
Yes, wow. So seamless link there. Thank you very much. But yeah, it's probably worth saying that actually we've learned a lot in terms of even our other work from working with Rachel and colleagues. And you may have noticed a few months back that we started to change the visual style even of the charts we did elsewhere to make the pattern more prominent and so forth. And that was all part of that process. So yes, big thanks from us for that. So if I just go back and share just the very last bit of the presentation, then so that was Rachel with her naming lights there. No, it's not. Where's it gone? There we are. Yes, that's Rachel with her naming lights. Just this last thing really to say is about how you can shape what we do, because obviously, if, as I said before, the primary purpose of us doing all this evidence work is that it's helpful and impactful and useful, then we want to make sure that's true. So if you see anything you think, oh, it'd be better if it was like this, or I'd like to know more about this, whatever, we always want to hear that. So split out the feedback into two broad sections, so general feedback and the cultural participation monitor. So in general, when you come to events like this, you take part and you comment, you put things in the chat, or you have discussions. We're always listening to that in terms of what that might mean in terms of what we can do differently and better. Likewise, when we say share surveys afterwards and get feedback from people afterwards, that really isn't a formality. That does very much shape what we choose to prioritise. We had a thing where after one of our recent events, Laura Drain, a consultant from Wales, got in touch to say, I noticed this in your data. Could the reason for this be whatever? It's like Panto, Christmas sales seem to be relatively strong compared to other things affected by the cost of living. Is that just because people booked them earlier? So we could go and say, oh, that's an interesting question, go and look at the data, check whether it was true. And in that instance, we found out, for example, that it seemed to be robust regardless of when people booked. But we wouldn't have known that if we hadn't had the prompt. So, do please feed us your questions, feed us your queries or interpretations. Also, if you have very particular things you want us to find out, if it's something we have the data for and it's not a massive task, we will just do a quick there and then, oh, you want to know what the profile of this group is, we think we can find it, we'll do it. So we can do kind of quick response queries like that. Other things will take a bit more working out. Maybe you might need to change our systems, but all of it's helpful. So just drop us an email, evidence@theordinanceagency.org. The cultural participation monitor in particular, though, lots of the same sort of things apply. You can send us ideas, you can send us questions, you can send us what you think are the hot topics. So, for example, we've heard some people say there's a whole thing going on about behaviour in theatres at the moment, and how our audience is behaving. Might that be a thing that would be useful to look at? That's the kind of thing that we might pick up. But there could be other hot topics that you think, oh, actually, I've noticed this about donation patterns, or different family groups are behaving differently, or whatever. We can pick up any of that. We do also have a way of organisations or groups of organisations partnering on the monitor. So we've had a whole host of partners previously, like the Association of Leading Visitor Attractions, the Alliance for Cultural Enterprise, Stage Text coming up, Vocalise previously, and the Centre for Cultural Value, also right the way through, where partners have said, here's a particular topic we want to explore in more detail. We'll do a whole load of questions around that. We'll do a whole load of reporting and events and things. That is a paid for thing, but it's hopefully not super expensive and allows you to get a bit more detail, contextualize all the other stuff we've been collecting anyway. So that might be an option, might be of interest. But also, because we want to keep it relevant to people, we will be convening a steering group from different people, different bits across the country, different types of organisations, etc. So if anyone thinks that they're quite keen to see even more behind the curtain in terms of the participation monitor and how it works and contribute to what it might cover, we'll be sharing more formally in the near future about how that process will work. But if you want to volunteer, just put your hand up, pop an email to the evidence at the Audience Agency email address, and we'll try and get a nice broad group from across the sector to kind of help make sure that it's all relevant. So that's it from us in terms of this bit. Before we just give a chance for people to raise any questions and thoughts, just to flag that the session next month is back to us doing particular bits of analysis, and that will be looking at things from the participation monitor about people who said they're interested in certain things, people who said they've actually done them, how do the two groups vary, what does that imply in terms of what we might do differently. So it's kind of how does interest translate into action, which confusingly is kind of the same name as the event next Wednesday about audience answers. What can I say? We're all about insight into action, it turns out.